Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. Um, in the background here, this is my the inside of my house. We have it all ready for the holidays and ready for Christmas. So hope you enjoy that during this video. And we're going to be talking about Elder David A. Bednar and something that he said February 2020 during a face-to-face. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video. If you end up liking it, hit the notification bell and make sure to leave your comments. So I first learned about this from Troy Abels, my friend from the Last Dispensation channel. He was doing a live stream and discussing various topics. And one of the things that came up was the half hour of silence in heaven. And he referenced this face-to-face where he thought that he heard Elder Bednar say that basically President Gordon B. Hinckley and President Monson hadn't really received much revelation during their time as presidents of the church. So I thought that was interesting because, I don't know exactly right now what I think about the half hour of silence. If you don't know what that is, essentially it's talked about in the book of Revelation and also in Doctrine and Covenants. And there's supposed to be a half hour of silence before the resurrection happens and when we're changed, those that are alive on the earth, that when our bodies are changed. So, I tend to think that, I don't know if I necessarily think that it has to do with the prophets receiving revelation. It could be more like just a time of waiting, a time that, because I think I've seen this somewhere where it's like a time when I think in the scriptures themselves, when it's a time when the angels are waiting to come down and basically, burn the vineyard and gather the tares together and cleanse the earth. So I'm not sure. I'm not going to put any interpretation on that yet. Maybe I'll do a specific video about that in the future. But I wanted to check this out, and so he pointed me to where he had heard this, and I think this is like a face-to-face for CES personnel and for seminary teachers and stuff like that. So what he said is he talked about how a lot of people have pointed out that it seems like there's been so much revelation since President Nelson became prophet of the church. And then he says, now I don't mean to be sarcastic, but thank goodness that we've received so much revelation, because we didn't have very much during President Hinckley or President Monson. So in this case, he wasn't actually saying that. He wasn't saying that they didn't receive revelation. He talked about how the things that are coming out with President Nelson, these are things that have been worked on for years and for decades before they ever saw the light of day. He talked about how back in the 50s, how back in the 50s you had President David O. McCabe that was really stressing the importance of family. And he talked about how, back in those days, that's when you had TV shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, like really wholesome TV shows. So like, why in the world would you be doing this at a time when that's not really an issue in society? And he said, well, it's because you need to start those things that early in preparation for the future. So, excuse me. So, we know that the Proclamation to the World on the Family, that came out in the mid 90s. I think it was 1995. I'm not sure. So, but this was, I think already in the works since the 50s. It's interesting. So basically, it's not like President Nelson is just like making all these changes. Like he's just been dying to like make these changes to the church, and everyone was holding him back. But now that he's in charge, he can do what he wants. Get rid of those angel Moroni's on temples. It's not like that. Now he talked about the concept of, when it comes to our general authorities and the prophet and the apostles. I'm sorry. I don't know why I have the yawns right now. got plenty of sleep. Haven't had to take my kids to school this whole week, so that's been nice. We've been sleeping in. Uh, anyway, he talked about how when it comes to revelation in church leaders, it's not so much about what the revelation is. So, for example, the family, but when to implement it, or when to implement it in the church, right? So it's not so much the what, it's the when. So he talked about how Gordon B. Hinckley, he came home from his mission and he started working in the communications department, and he was in contact with David O. McKay, and they were talking about how they would need to basically need to do temple ordinances in different languages at the same time, which kind of led to talking about the audio visual means of presenting things in the temple, which now we have the temple video instead of live performances. So that was something that they talked about. And then in the 60s, when Gordon B. Hinckley was in Asia, he was talking to the Council of the 12, and he basically said that the way that things are done in large temples back in Utah and in the United States basically wouldn't work in Asia. And then in the 70s, it was actually Spencer W. Kimball who was the first one to start making smaller temples. And that's something that I didn't know about. I think a lot of people assume that idea came from President Hinckley. That's what I thought up until today. But apparently it was Spencer W. Kimball. I have this article from rsc.byu.edu. I'll put this in the description below so you can read this whole thing. And so you can watch Elder Bednar's face-to-face. From what I saw, I didn't watch the whole thing, but from what I saw, it looked pretty good. So under a section called Building Temples, it says, in his first year as president, Spencer dedicated the Washington, D.C. temple, begun several years earlier in President McKay's time. Some large temple building continued, but the Kimball administration saw a great increase of smaller temples, another instance of taking the church to the people. Okay, so it wasn't President Hinckley that came up with the idea. It was already there. But he talked about how it wasn't, again, in President Hinckley's case, it wasn't so much what the revelation was, but when. And it was President Hinckley that decided that he wanted to do 100 temples by the year 2000. So that's what he did. So he announced just a ton of temples. And I clearly remember that, just thinking how wonderful and also how crazy that was. And I'm so glad that it happened. Okay, so, I probably in this particular case, and I'm not like trying to disagree with Troy, because I don't think he had like a very firm stance on this. He was just kind of recollecting something that he heard. But I don't think that the half hour of silence, if it has happened, I don't think it's been because of a lack of revelation. I don't know what it has to do with. I'll probably have to do a separate video on it. I will say, and I've said this before, from just a church member's point of view, it felt like not a whole lot was going on during the time of President Monson. There were kind of like two big notable things that I remember with him. He lowered the mission age, and then we had that kind of like missionary surge, right? So that was big. He also was the one that announced the Rome, Italy temple, and that was big as well. But aside from that, as far as like changes to the church go, it felt like it was a pretty quiet time. So I don't know that necessarily relates to the half hour of silence, but it's something to think about. And if all these things have been in the work, all the changes since President Nelson, if those have been in the works since for years and for decades, it'd be interesting to know what else is coming down the pipeline. So just some things to think about. I guess the big takeaway for me here in this video is that it was Spencer W. Kimball that came up with the idea of making smaller temples. So that's kind of cool to know. Um, so yeah, I'll just end it there. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video. If you liked it, hit the notification bell. Leave your comments if you have any additional information or anything else that you'd like to add. If you'd like to come on my channel, I like doing Zoom interviews with people, do a 1 hour Zoom interview, talk about whatever you want to. My email is my.christian.homestead@gmail.com. So just email me. We'll work out a time and we can do an interview. And I'll talk to you guys later.